What's the better way of raising rabbits, in a colony or in a cage? Today I'm going to have a look at the pros and cons of colony raising versus cage raising. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewaukaka Valley Homestead. There are different ways of raising meat rabbits, and there's like an ongoing discussion between the two different sides. Colonies better, cages better, colonies better, cages better. Today I'm going to be looking at both sides and telling you what I actually think. There's a growing movement of people wanting to raise their animals in a more natural environment. Rabbits that you keep as pets and rabbits that you keep as meat are the English European rabbit. And these are very different to the American cottontails, which grow wild in America. Cottontails and hares tend to be solitary animals that get together only for a short time to mate, and then they go off and live singly again. They don't have the same social structure or the same, friendships really, that the European rabbits develop. The wild rabbits that we have in New Zealand, in Australia and in the UK are the European rabbit, and they live in big groups called fluffles, and which is a great name. And they have a natural social hierarchy, and you'll often find them out together. I remember my first experience of discovering that you can raise rabbits like this. I was actually a kid, and my mother taught at a preschool, and here we call them kindergartens, but anyway, and they were going to get a pet rabbit for the preschool, and we went to see this breeder, and she said, "Oh, come look at my shed," and she had this shed that she opened up, and there were just rabbits and guinea pigs everywhere, and they were happy, and they were running around, and they were having a grand old life. And I thought, if I ever have rabbits, that's the way I'm going to raise them. Now, don't get me wrong, there are definitely some upsides to keeping rabbits in cages. They're easier to catch, they're easy to keep clean, especially if you have a grated bottom where the poop can just fall through. You can have a bin underneath just catching it. That makes it a lot easier. It's easier to keep the rabbits cool, although some would argue that if you allow your rabbits to burrow in the ground, then that's actually an even easier way of keeping them cool. But it's definitely easier to set up fans on a cage than it is to set it up in a large colony setting. Rabbits kept in cages don't have the opportunity to fight or argue. And the other side to that is they also don't have the opportunity to snuggle and be friends with the other bunnies. The downsides I find to cage setups is, especially if you're doing a larger operation, is that the setup cost can be really expensive. You can make your own cages, and that will definitely decrease the cost somewhat. However, setting up a large setup can be quite costly. Feeding and watering can take a long time every day because you're having to do every single cage separately as well. You can set up a giant watering system for all your cages, but you're still going to have to go to every single cage every day to give them food. Rabbits in cages have less muscle tone. They don't have that opportunity to jump and kick and run around that they do when they're living in a colony. And they also don't have that opportunity to be social, and that is actually part of what European rabbits prefer to do. Also, if you have a moody rabbit, keeping them caged means that they're a lot more inclined to bite, whereas I find that moody rabbits in a colony are more likely to run away than they are to come and attack you. There are some real benefits to keeping rabbits in colonies. One is that feeding them and watering them is much easier. You can just have one or two feeding and watering stations, and I tend to use like big chicken feeders. That works really well for most of the rabbit food that we use. And it means that you can have a bucket waterer as well, which you're not having to fill up all the time. Rabbits that grow in a colony usually have really good muscle tone, and they're able to express those natural social things that they naturally would like to do. They will develop a hierarchy in the same way that chickens do. So you usually have a head doe, and she'll have her little minions, and the buck just kind of hangs out in the background. Keeping rabbits in a colony can also increase their natural immunity. You tend to find that colony-raised rabbits are a lot more hardy. They're less susceptible to a lot of diseases. And you'll often find that a rabbit that was really nasty in a cage will actually work quite well in a colony, and eventually they learn to come up and sniff around and get food from you, and they're a lot less likely to bite. Rabbits living on the ground are able to cool off a lot easier as well, especially if they've got somewhere shady that they can be, or even better, somewhere that they can burrow. Meat rabbits that are raised in a colony that have access to grass will eat a lot less pellets than rabbits raised in a cage that only have access to pellets. Three of the main downsides to keeping rabbits in a colony. One of them is that they can be quite difficult to catch. One of the best ways of actually catching them, other than having a Ninja 9000 like I do, which is my children, I just send them in and they catch them. They're great. But what you can do is set up a particular corner where you've got a couple of gates, and you always feed the rabbits into that corner. So when it comes time to catch them, you just shut the gates on them and you'll catch them in there. It's a really good tip. You also have less control over the colony, which for me is a great thing. It means that nature is playing out. It means you're more likely to get the hardier, disease-resistant rabbits, and you don't have the same control over who breeds who or who breeds when. But then you're not having to think about who breeds who or who breeds when. You just know that you've got the good, resilient stock and that the best will survive. And anybody that gets unwell in a colony is usually considered a cull, which means you take them out of the colony. It doesn't necessarily mean that you kill them, but you don't use them as breeding stock. Also, if you allow your rabbits to burrow, which I have a video on the reason why you might want to let your rabbits burrow. There's like 7 different reasons that I think letting your rabbits burrow if you can is a really great idea. I'll link it up the top. I think it's that side. But you have less control of what happens in a burrow. But that can be a good thing too, because the kits that emerge are the ones that have survived. They're the ones that have the natural immunities. They're the ones that have been really good feeders. They're the good, strong, toughest of the tough, and that's ultimately what we're aiming for, is the good, strong, resilient stock. The reason we chose to raise our rabbits in a colony was because I have the firm belief that happy meat comes from happy animals. The best high quality stuff that you can have comes from happy animals, despite whatever argument there may be about how nice or not nice it is to raise animals for meat. That is the choice that our family has made. And because of that, this is what we have decided to do, and we want to have meat animals all live a really good life until that one day that's not so great. The way that we raise our rabbits is we have one big shed that the rabbits live in, and then once the kits naturally wean at about 4 or 5 weeks, that's when we move them into a grow-out pen, and that's where we can focus on giving them plenty of high-protein food, and they live out until they're sort of usually 8 to 10 weeks, depending on what else is happening in our life. That's when we would process them. And in the meantime, usually the mothers would have another litter. One of the complaints that people that prefer to cage raise have about colony raising is that they think that the mothers are going to get exhausted and they're going to be overbred. The reality is that rabbits are prey animals. That's their role in life, is to replicate quickly and die easily. And that is the role that they play in the general wider animal society. So this means that rabbits generally are happier and healthier while they are breeding. And as long as your mother rabbit has plenty of access to food and she is maintaining a good weight, then the concern of overbreeding her is not actually a legit thing. A doe will naturally, usually when you put a buck in with some does, for the first few months, you're going to get babies every 4 weeks. And that's just how it is. However, the doe controls the breeding. And the doe will chase off a buck if she's not interested. And if she's too busy, or she's stressed, or she's not in fit condition, she will not breed with him. And so usually what will happen is you'll find that your colony will settle into a more natural rhythm where she might have babies every 6 to 8 weeks, and they'll usually, or they might have them every 4 weeks during the cooler seasons, and then in the middle of winter and the middle of summer they'll skip a few because that's not optimum conditions to be raising babies in. So you just have to kind of trust the process. It is a more natural way of raising rabbits, and because of that you kind of just have to go into it with a bit of a different mindset. We're not here to control the whole situation. We're here to let nature do its thing to encourage these rabbits to become happy and healthy. If you want to know more about our way of raising meat rabbits in a colony, I suggest you check out my book. I've put a link to it down below, and that's where I have put all the knowledge that I have in my head. I've put it all on paper so that somebody else can read it and absorb it. It's really easy to read, and I recommend you give it a look. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, hit the like button, consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you videos twice a week on growing and preserving your own food. We'll see you in the next one.